to part 2 of the NHL first round Western Conference coverage. My name is Wyatt Zieger. You can find me on Twitter phonetically at Wyatt Zieger, joined alongside and always by the beautiful Brennan Klak. You can find him at Twitter at NHL Update. Brennan, thanks for joining me again.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just glad that someone called me beautiful, as it's been a while.
ICU, and you are beautiful. This is an ICU video production. And Brennan, let's get started right off the hop. Vegas versus Chicago. Chicago, the upset on the Edmonton Oilers. You got the blanket beside you. Have you been holding that a little tighter since?
You know what? I was a little bit not as optimistic on the Oilers going in. I think in the last video, I said Oilers in 5 on that series, but I did feel like there was a couple flaws on their team, and I didn't think that Chicago was actually too far away from them. So I wasn't surprised. It's very disappointing. But at the end of the day, the Oilers are still very young. They have McDavid, they have Draisaitl, so a rebound is inevitable.
Yeah, I've had Edmonton sweeping that series, and I've been wrong before. You can ask any of my ex-girlfriends. But moving along like they did, Viva Las Vegas. If I was a gambling man, I'd be betting heavy on Vegas to take down Chicago in this series. I think Chicago exposed the fact that Edmonton had leaky goaltending and a porous defense and a soft bottom six. Vegas has none of those things. I'm sure they're shored up in those departments. Do you see any holes that Chicago could try to expose on the Knights?
Not many, because Vegas is very, very deep. They were killing teams in the exhibition from behind. Like, they were down early and scoring 4 goals in the third period. And that was without Max Pacioretty, who's arguably their best offensive forward. I know Mark Stone is their best overall guy, but Pacioretty is a huge shot driver for them, and they get him back. Vegas is very deep and excellent. And if Chicago wants to expose them at all, it's going to have to be in some very slight ways. Maybe they can really start roughing up their defense, but that's not really how Chicago plays. Maybe they can expose Marc-Andre Fleury a little bit if Vegas chooses to go with Fleury. And if the Vegas Golden Knights start Robin Lehner, well, at least Chicago's actually had Robin Lehner on their roster this season. So they might know a couple tendencies of Lehner's game that we're not thinking of right now. But Vegas is just really solid. It's really hard for me to think of ways that Chicago could get them, because there's no real discernible thing the Blackhawks do that Vegas can't defend against.
I know one of the things we talked about beforehand, and you kind of just touched on it, is how early does Vegas go to Marc-Andre Fleury? Like, let's say they go up 2-0, game 3 and 4 are back-to-backs, and it's hard to imagine that they start the same goaltender twice in that. I mean, that might be a little more troublesome if you're the Chicago Blackhawks having to go to your backup in this series. But what impact could you see Marc-Andre Fleury having in this, and how having 2 reliable goaltenders?
Well, I mean, Pete DeBoer has said over and over and over, we have 2 number 1 goalies, and the Vegas Golden Knights don't seem to have a problem with either guy, especially considering that Marc-Andre Fleury has been there for them in the final before and was a key part of their run. But this season, Fleury did look a little bit old. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury had about a .905 save percentage, and he wasn't at his best. So I do hope that they start Robin Lehner for their sake, but they do have enough confidence in Fleury that they don't really care who goes where. But it does get interesting if Chicago somehow upsets Vegas and has like a 2-1 series lead to start, because in that back-to-back, then Fleury's going to be so key. And Chicago might be able to expose him as the one flaw that Vegas has. I mean, the Blues got Fleury quite a bit in their exhibition game. He was swimming a little in the crease. So it should be interesting to see how they allocate that. I would go Lehner game 1 myself.
Youth was an X factor for Chicago in their series against Edmonton. We saw what looked like the arrival of Kirby Dach, and that's going to be scary in that West for the next 12 to 15 years. And Dominic Kubalik as well had himself a heck of a series. How hard is it going to be to contain the offense from those youngsters for Vegas?
It'll present a challenge for sure. I mean, I think Vegas can handle it, especially because of how good their D is, like with Shea Theodore, Nate Schmidt, Braden McNabb. It's never guys that wow you from a name perspective, but they seem to get the job done more often than not. And I also think Zach Whitecloud has been an excellent addition to Vegas. He's a young 23-year-old guy. A lot of teams wanted him. Vegas has kind of had him in their arsenal for a while, not used him, but he looked really good in exhibition as well. the Blackhawks have a lot of speed, and guys like Kirby Dach and also on defense, Adam Boquist, I thought, had a good series against the Oilers too. I think those guys are going to cause a problem. I think Kubalik's shot in the power play is definitely a problem, but if there's any team that can handle it, it's the Golden Knights. And I also think that their checking forwards are very adept as well. Nicolas Roy has a lot of nice size to him. Cousins, who they got at the trade deadline, he's a good two-way guy. He can do a lot defensively for them as well. And the William Carrier, Ryan Reeves tandem, they just run around, and their physicality is going to hurt the Blackhawks as well, because the Oilers don't really have those guys. They had Zach Kassian, but he didn't show up.
No, he looked like the invisible man in that series, and Ryan Reeves is going to have to be the exact opposite of that. I see him as a big X factor in that series. We saw what he did to get under the skin of San Jose last year, and let's see if he can repeat that. Do you have a prediction in this series?
I think it's Vegas in 5, Vegas in 6, Vegas in 7. It all depends on how the goalies are allocated to me. So I'm going to go somewhere in the middle and say Vegas in 6. But that's the biggest difference to me in the series. It's just who starts when. But ultimately, the one thing that Vegas does that the Chicago Blackhawks didn't really get from the Edmonton Oilers is that Vegas is a hard forechecking team. The Oilers had a lot of success when they had James Neal and Alex Chiasson going in together and really hitting the Blackhawks defense, but the Oilers didn't do it enough, and Vegas does it on every single shift. And that Hawks D isn't that good, and if they get worn down a little bit, then the series could get out of hand.
I almost want to take a Vegas sweep myself, but I don't see Jonathan Toews or Patrick Kane letting that happen. So I'm going to go with Vegas in 5 as well. So we do somewhat agree on that stance. Moving on to the next series, Colorado Avalanche, they're the 2 seed. They take on the Arizona Coyotes, who are fresh off a series win against the Nashville Predators. For my money, Colorado has a lot more horsepower and can not only match the speed of Arizona, but surpass it as well. Comfort was the MVP of that play-in series, but you have to worry about overloading a guy who hasn't played in 4.5 months. And if he continues to see the shot volume that he did in that series against Nashville, I think it might be lights out for Arizona. Do you see Darcy Comfort continuing to his MVP, his Conn Smythe quality play in this series against Colorado, or do you think that the Ponies are just going to be a little too much?
Well, Darcy Kuemper historically has actually been pretty good for Arizona against Colorado. Like Kuemper, I believe, shut them out earlier in the season. So I don't think he's going to have any change in his play. I think he's going to be very hard to beat. The biggest difference to me in the series is going to be that against Nashville, Darcy Kuemper had about like 33 shots a game at him, and 2 times it was 40 shots. So there was a lot of rubber headed towards Darcy Kemper's way, and Nashville only has like 1 or 2 real sniping kind of guys, like Philip Forsberg and Victor Arvidsson potentially. But you look at Colorado, they just have a lot of depth, and they have Nathan MacKinnon. And you factor in Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, that power play, and those forwards making those 40 shots. And it makes me think that there's going to be more going in. Like, no offense to Nashville, but those guys are just lethal. And it's a little different having 40 shots thrown at you, quality and with speed, the way Colorado transitions down the ice, than having Ryan Ellis and Roman Josi shoot at you from the blue line a lot.
One thing Colorado didn't like last year when they got bounced in the playoffs was their lack of depth at center. Well, they shored that up when they traded Tyson Barrie for Nazem Kadri. After a year now, fair to say that the Avalanche have won that trade. And how big of a difference do you think Kadri makes in this series?
I mean, from a value perspective, that trade was fair. It was Tyson Barrie, a guy who was their number 1/number 2 defenseman, but definitely number 1 from an offensive perspective for a long time. And Alex Kerfoot is actually quite a good third line center himself. So from the way that we saw that trade, oh yeah, Toronto did quite well there. Barrie was a bad fit for them. And you think about Colorado and what they got from a fit perspective, and it was a lot better. Nazem Kadri is a good matchup guy. You can put him against the top players, and he'll really annoy them and hurt their day. He's physical. And a big key to Nazem Kadri's game, too, is that he's on the power play for the Avs on the top unit. And so far, he's had a lot of success there in exhibition because he's a battler in front of the net. And it's given Colorado a bit of an extra gear in terms of having a guy there that can get the garbage. So they didn't really have that before. They do now. Kadri's been a game changer for them.
One of the things that really looked to annoy the Arizona Coyotes in that series against Nashville was defensemen who can move the puck. Every time Roman Josi seemed to join the rush, Arizona looked a little lost on defense. Knowing that, how do you see Cale Makar faring out in this series? And do you think Arizona will be able to contain the offense that the Calder nominee has been able to bring to the table so far?
Cale Makar, one of the things about his game that I love the most is that he's so good at keeping the play alive. Like, there are a lot of teams that don't have that D-man that can, if you try to fire it out, they can keep it in at the blue line with Aplom. But Makar is probably the best guy in the NHL at being able to leap up, go against the boards, do whatever he can to keep it in, and then cause a dangerous scoring chance right after. The only team that can really say that they have that guy is Nashville has it with Ryan Ellis and Roman Josi, because those two guys are good at it. But Makar is also just as good. And considering that Arizona didn't really contain Roman Josi or Ryan Ellis, they just had Darcy Kemper making a lot of saves, and there was still a lot of shots headed their way in possession time. It's not going to change anything in terms of Makar being back there and the Avs deep defense as a whole, because guess who else is good at that? Sam Girard, who incredibly underrated player and is going to also cause fits for them from in their own zone.
Do you have a prediction in the series?
Yeah, I'm going to say Colorado in 6. I'm giving Darcy Kemper the respect to say he's going to win them 2 games. But a big part of the Coyotes to me is who's going to score. And Taylor Hall was good on the power play, but his 5-on-5 numbers left a lot to be desired. And look, Phil Kessel actually didn't look too bad in that series. But I think about the Avalanche having better goalies than Nashville did. UC Saros is good, but I think Grubauer and Francouz are both really good. I like both guys, especially the way the Avalanche play. The Avs have a deeper defense than Nashville did, too. I think Nashville, Ekholm struggled a little, and Fabro wasn't quite ready. He's number 4, but maybe more of a 5-6 until he develops more. Colorado's got 6 deep. They're just really good there. So overall, you add another layer to Colorado, and I don't see Arizona being able to overcome it.
I also will take Colorado in this series. I'm going to say they get it done in 5. Arizona's a slow starting team, and Colorado is a team that jumps down your throat quite quickly. So I see them scoring the first goal in every game this series. I'll make a bold prediction there, and I think Colorado takes this one in 5. Comfort does find a way to steal Arizona at least one game. Moving to our next series, Dallas and Calgary. This will be one of the tightest series in the playoffs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be one of the most exciting if you like goals. Is that right, Brennan?
Yeah, this series kind of it's a little boring on paper because Dallas and Calgary both don't really shoot the lights out of other teams, and the way that the teams match up is also a little bit of cause for concern for the entertainment part of the matchup, because if you look at it from a, well, Matt Tkachuk could stir things up type of thing, well, it's not like Dallas has a lot of guys that are going to be getting too much into Tkachuk's game. I mean, they have Jamie Benn out there, and I don't think Ben's going to take any of Tkachuk's nonsense. I think a guy like Jamie Alexiak's also not going to, but it's not like Dallas is full of like real scrappy, oh, we're going to make this exciting on them. Nah, it's a lot of veteran players on Dallas who just really want to win, and they play a very defensive shell kind of style where they all kind of plug the neutral zone and let Ben Bishop save all of the stuff from the corners and from the side. And the other thing, too, is that Dallas has Miro Heiskanen, and Miro Heiskanen's a really good shutdown defenseman. Well, you got the Calgary line of Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan and Elias Lindholm. They were good on the power play against Winnipeg, but at 5-on-5, they left a lot to be desired, and they've never gotten over the hump of really being a driving force for Calgary in a playoff. And you put a guy like Heiskanen on them, and boy, we could be looking at a lot of 2-1 games where goals are going off a guy's ass.
I'm going to agree with you there. I don't see either team in either one of these games blowing out the other. I think it's going to be a lot of 2-1, 3-2 hockey games. I think Dallas has to be concerned about offense for sure. They get one win in that play-in series against St. Louis. They only scored 4 goals in 3 games. 3 of those goals came within a 5-minute span of each other. So when you're looking at this Dallas Stars offense, you got to be saying who's going to bring it. Jamie Benn and Tyler Sagan and Alex Radulov, obviously that top line's going to have to lead the way. And Alex Radulov still has one of the dirtiest backhand passes in this league with that flat blade he uses. I see this series going the distance in my eyes. I think this is a 7-game one where you can really take either team. Calgary didn't really do enough to impress me against the Winnipeg Jets, and they were a pretty depleted team. I mean, game 3 was a bit of a heavy-handed win there for Calgary, but the Jets, without a majority of their lineup, still were in most of the games. And I just see that Calgary has a lot of holes on that, especially in the bottom 6, but so does Dallas. So this is going to be one of those series where it's a real pick 'em. I'm going to say the Flames in 7. What do you think?
Well, special teams ends up being a pretty big factor too, because the Flames power play really woke up, and Eric Gustafsson was a help on that as well. But Dallas's penalty kill is pretty decent, and a lot of it also has to do with the goalies. I mean, Dallas has a health thing going on right now with Ben Bishop, where he's day to day, and they're not entirely sure what his status is going to be going into game 1, although they will be okay with Anton Khudobin, who also had a nice season. Calgary, Cam Talbot becomes the biggest X factor, because if Dallas wants to make these games 2-1, then Cam Talbot can try to restrict them to 1 or 0, right? Talbot's the guy who I thought had a really nice series against Winnipeg and really looked like that calmer presence we saw when he was an Oiler in his prime. And if Talbot can play just as good as the other guy in Dallas's side, then Calgary does have a little bit more scoring, especially that Tkachuk, Backlund, Mangiapane line can really hammer down on you in the other zone, that maybe Calgary can put out a little bit of an advantage there. But I'm going to go with Dallas in 7, because in the playoffs, sometimes boring wins. And I'm not saying Dallas is going very far, but if Ben Bishop can play, then I've watched that team be boring and win enough times to suggest that they might contain Calgary's top line enough that the Flames get snuffed out.
And my bold prediction for this series, I'm going to say that Perry, Ben, Tkachuk, and Lucic combined for more fights than goals in this one. Moving along to our last one in the West, probably my favorite series that I'm going to be watching in this, St. Louis, the 4 seed, taking on Canucks, the 5 seed. Canucks just finished off the Minnesota Wild in 4 games. I thought they looked a little shaky in that first game when they lost, but they come back to win 3 straight. How do you like their odds against the defending Stanley Cup champions?
I think the Canucks and Blues is going to be a really, really fun series, especially because in the exhibition, like my blind behind me during this video, the Blues defense broke a little bit, and they had to have Jordan Binnington really save the day for them. Binnington made tons and tons of saves against Vegas, and it was just a shellacking there. And it's because their system just wasn't quite up to speed to what they would like it to be from the regular season and from their cup win. But the thing with Vancouver is that their top line is just very, very fast, quick, and creative. And Elias Pettersson, after the game 1 cross-checking and mauling he got from Minnesota, he really woke up and he started putting his own physical aspect into Vancouver's game. And JT Miller, Brock Besser, Tanner Pearson, Bo Horvat, like they all showed up. Like all those guys were tenacious and getting chances, and the power play was really good because of Quinn Hughes. So Vancouver's youthfulness is going to be a huge determination for them in this series, because the Blues necessarily aren't the best with handling speed.
I as well will jump on the train of that youthful exuberance. I think Quinn Hughes was probably the best player in that series for Vancouver, followed by Elias Pettersson, who might not have gotten that many goals in the series, but he was buzzing, don't get me wrong. I mean, the amount of quality chances he had on net, he was able to get one in the series, but those were the best 2 players for the Canucks. I thought Markstrom, while he had some really, really good games, could look squeaky at time, and there was a couple of goals, especially in that comebacker for Vancouver, where it was a back-breaking goal against, or from a short side, or from a bad angle, and I think he's got to clean those ones up going against St. Louis, because St. Louis has a lot of shooters, including one Vladimir Tarasenko, who I think could be a big factor for St. Louis in this one. The Blues offense, do you think they can finally get things rolling after a rough play-in?
I think they can. I mean, Jacob Markstrom might be the best goalie left in this playoff in terms of making saves in tight that should have went in. And I think he will rebound from some of those bad ones. But I mean, another thing that Vancouver's got to watch that the Blues are definitely happy to capitalize on is Tyler Myers basically lived in the penalty box in that qualifying series. I mean, he took like what 9 to 11 minors. Like every time Myers was on the ice, it was, oh, he's going to the box. And the Blues power play with Tarasenko back is going to be really hard to defend because Pietrangelo, Tarasenko, Schwartz, Ryan O'Reilly, David Perron, like a lot of weapons, a lot of guys that can do some damage out there. I do think that we're not talking enough about the Blues experience as well. I mean, the Vancouver Canucks, as good as they looked against Minnesota, they're not very experienced. They have a lot of younger players. They have a lot of guys like Jake Virtanen, for example, who have not even played that much in the qualifying round due to the injuries that they got from Michael Furland. And I mean, Vancouver, to me, it's like a catch-22, right? The youthfulness is going to help you, but it's also going to hurt you. And the Blues know what to do when they're behind. Their defense is also very quick on transition and will capitalize and pounce on mistakes. Guys like Parayko, Vince Dunn, they can move the puck really well. So ultimately, like, the Blues have enough weapons where Markstrom's going to have to be on his game.
I think these are just two teams that really match up well against one another, where they have solid goaltending. I think they have pretty good defense on both, especially the top fours of both teams. And then, there is a lot of depth between the two of them. I think St. Louis might just edge them out in the bottom six category. But I see this going 7 games. I think this one goes the distance more than I do think any of the other 7 series would. But I'll take the Canucks to knock off St. Louis, the defending Cup champs, in 7 games. I think it's going to have to be done by committee, just like we saw against Minnesota, and the Bessers, the Horvats, the Pearsons, Toffoli's. They're all going to have to step up in this one if they want to get it done. Who do you like in this series, Klak?
I'm going to say the Blues in 6. That they could have walked into that round robin 3-0 if they wanted to. I mean, you look at the losses they had. They lose to Dallas in a shootout, but they were up most of the game. You look at the game against Colorado, Nazem Kadri scored with 0.1 seconds on the clock. Otherwise, the Blues were playing pretty decent there too. They do have to watch the shot thing. Like they were up on Vegas as well, but Bennington had to make like 40 saves, and that's going to be a little bit of a problem. But Vancouver's not as good of a possession team as the Blues would have to worry about. Like, Vancouver is about a 49% team because that bottom 6 is just really ineffective. Like, sometimes Brandon Sutter is not too bad and he can make a lot of plays happen. Sometimes a guy like Tyler Mott can cause some havoc, but I just don't really believe in them versus the Blues being so experienced and deep. Like, the Blues still have a lot of great players down their lineup. Robert Thomas, young guy, like, I mean, he's on their third line sometimes. I guess with even strength, it bumps up a little bit. But I mean, the Blues still have a good C core and enough players to make me think that the Canucks are going to cause a problem, but not enough for them to lose.
All right, so recapping here, I have the Vegas Golden Knights winning in 5. You have Vegas as well in...
I had Vegas in 6, but for fun, let's say Vegas in 7.
Ooh, okay, I like it. Here's where we agree again. I'm taking Colorado in 5.
I'm saying Avs in 6.
I've got Calgary in 7.
I'm going Dallas and sleepy hockey in 7.
And I will take the Canucks in 7.
I'm taking the Blues in 6.
All right. Well, good luck to both of us, and good luck to every team in the series. That's it for us today. This is an ICU video production. We'll be back for round 2 of the NHL playoffs.